What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Jon Jones' heavyweight debut in question once again. It has now been over 2.5 years since former pound-for-pound kingpin Jon Jones competed inside the octagon. After defeating Dominick Reyes at UFC 247, all signs pointed to Jones competing against Francis Ngannou in a highly anticipated super fight where Johnny Bones would look to become a two-division UFC champ. After contract negotiations stalled, Jones ultimately relinquished the 205-pound strap with intentions of making a permanent move to heavyweight. Unfortunately, the story ends here. Since the summer of 2020, there has been no official announcements in regards to when Jones would compete inside the octagon. Although rumors and reports have continued to surface indicating that an announcement would be incoming, nothing has ever been finalized. Earlier this year, after heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou unified the heavyweight title by defeating interim champion Ciryl Gane, it was revealed that the UFC was once again targeting a super fight between Jones and Ngannou once the heavyweight champ was cleared to return following knee surgery. Now, with 2022 winding down, fans are still waiting for news regarding the bout. With Ngannou potentially sidelined until 2023 as he recovers from knee surgery, Jones' heavyweight debut is once again in question. Longtime MMA Journalist of the Year Ariel Helwani revealed via Twitter that although Jones wants to compete at heavyweight before the end of the year, he still needs a dance partner. With Ngannou sidelined until next year, the UFC is reportedly interested in a bout between Jones and former champion Stipe Miocic. Unfortunately, according to Helwani, that deal is far from done. Whether or not the UFC will look to find an opponent for Jones elsewhere remains to be seen. With top-ranked fighters like Ciryl Gane and Curtis Blaydes waiting in the wings, the UFC may decide to book an interim heavyweight title fight, or a number one contender fight. Stay tuned for updates as they become available. Jose Aldo reflects on how a text from Dana White unintentionally played a major role in the birth of his son. When Jose Aldo announced his retirement from MMA last month, it marked the end of an era. The former WEC champion turned UFC kingpin had been a staple of the UFC roster since the promotion created the 145-pound division, and had long been hailed as one of the most beloved fighters in the entire sport. After losing to Merab Dvalishvili, Aldo wanted out. Despite having one fight remaining on his contract, the former 145-pound king wanted to make the jump to boxing. As many fight fans are aware, the UFC's contracts do not permit fighters to compete for other organizations while under contract. As a result, Aldo knew that with one fight left on his contract, he had to text UFC President Dana White before committing to boxing. Fortunately, the UFC president was gracious and understanding, thanking Aldo and wishing him all the best while reiterating that if he ever needs anything, he simply has to ask. The moment was an emotional one for Aldo, who was quick to share the good news with his wife, who was pregnant at the time. Aldo's wife Vivian became so emotional by the good news that her blood pressure went up and she was forced to go to the hospital. It was there that the doctors discovered that she had a potentially dangerous complication that could have put the couple's unborn son's life in danger. Fortunately, the doctors were able to successfully deliver Aldo's son, Jose Aldo III, at just 36 weeks old. The way Aldo sees it, White's generosity unintentionally helped save his son's life. During a recent interview with MMA Fighting, Aldo recalled the situation, saying, "I will never stand against someone like that. Even unintentionally. He's always helped me in my life. I get emotional talking about it. Not that I owe him my son's life, but it was after his message that got Vivian emotional, her blood pressure going up, and we taking her to the hospital. He was born with all odds against him. But thanks to Dana, God always put good people in our lives to help us." Although Aldo is technically still under UFC contract, the promotion seems willing to allow him to compete in other combat sports. Given their generosity, Aldo has vowed that if he were to ever go back on his retirement and return to MMA, he would only compete in the UFC. Next up, Javier Mendez thinks Khabib Nurmagomedov could become the greatest coach of all time. UFC Hall of Famer Khabib Nurmagomedov was able to conquer every obstacle placed in his path over the course of his illustrious MMA career. From capturing UFC gold to dispatching of top contenders like Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, the Eagle has done it all. On the heels of his retirement, the Eagle set his sights on coaching, something that seemed like a natural next step as he stepped into the role his father held for so many years. Next weekend, Nurmagomedov will have the chance to see one of his fighters, Islam Makhachev, capture UFC gold. The accomplishment would not only solidify Khabib's place as one of the best coaches on the planet, but also continue the legacy of his father, who believed that one day Makhachev would become a world champion. The way American Kickboxing Academy coach Javier Mendez sees things, Nurmagomedov is on his way to earning the title of GOAT as a coach. During a recent interview on the UFC Unfiltered podcast, Mendez spoke about his protege, turned friend, turned peer, saying,
His father had trained him from such a young age to take the responsibility over as a fighter, as a coach, and he's taken over his father's footsteps. And, he's learned from me, he's learned from his father, and mostly his father, but to me, he's on track, in my opinion, because of his age, what he's doing, the camp I see, the fighters he has. He's on track to being the greatest coach of all time, in my opinion. I see it. I see the writing on the wall. And
with just days to go until Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev step into the octagon to compete for the vacant 155-pound championship, final preparations are underway for both teams in Abu Dhabi. Do you think October 22nd will mark the coronation of a new king in Islam Makhachev? Or will Charles Oliveira retake his place atop the storied division? Give us your thoughts in the comment section down below, and before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Juliana Pena fires back at Daniel Cormier over recent comments. Cormier responds, UFC Hall of Famer Daniel Cormier has found himself in the crosshairs of former women's bantamweight champion Juliana Pena after stating that he doesn't believe Pena deserves an immediate rematch against Amanda Nunes. The comments from Cormier came this week during an episode of his DC and RC podcast, where the former champ shot down Juliana Pena's claim to a trilogy fight with Amanda Nunes. The way Cormier saw things, Pena's performance in the lopsided second meeting between her and Nunes wasn't enough to justify an immediate trilogy fight. Naturally, the comments didn't sit too well with Pena, who fired back at Cormier on Instagram, where she wrote, DC, why you hating, playa? You got an immediate trilogy with Stipe Miocic after he finished you in the rematch. You have more title fights in the history of the UFC. Dang, let me live. Cormier, who was quick to respond, explained that he didn't mean things to come off that way. In addition, the former champ also made sure to apologize to Pena for how his initial comments came across. Despite the apology, the fact of the matter is that nobody is quite sure how the UFC will move forward with the women's 135-pound title. After Nunes was able to reclaim the belt via unanimous decision earlier this year, she gave no indication as to whether she would prefer to defend the 145-pound title or have an immediate trilogy fight with Pena. Considering how stacked the women's bantamweight division is right now, the UFC could look to book Pena a tune-up fight before proceeding with the trilogy bout. In the meantime, they could look to find Nunes an opponent at featherweight. However, considering there aren't many fighters competing in that division, Nunes' next fight could very well be a trilogy bout with Pena. Given the uncertainty hanging over the division, we want to hear from you. Who do you think Pena should fight next? Sound off in the comment section below. And now, for our breaking news story of the day, we have UFC fighter Jakar Close pulling out of his UFC fight on October 29th against Mark Madsen. What do you guys think about this situation? Let us know down in the comment section below. Last up, Dominick Reyes confused by preliminary card bout at UFC 281. At one point in time, Dominick Reyes seemed to be the next big thing at 205 pounds. With a 12-0 undefeated professional record that saw him go 6-0 inside the octagon while earning 2 Performance of the Night bonuses, Reyes' unique athleticism saw him garner considerable hype. In the midst of a massive winning streak, the former baseball star was booked for a title fight with Jon Jones at UFC 247. Although many scored the bout in his favor, the ringside judges ultimately awarded the decision to Jon Jones, who retained the belt. Unfortunately for Reyes, that marked the beginning of a rough patch that saw him then lose a bid at the vacant light heavyweight title later that year, before then being brutally knocked out by Jiří Procházka to start 2021. After a year away from the octagon, Reyes will look to make his successful return at UFC 281 and close out the year strong with a win over Ryan Spann. Much to the surprise of Reyes, his bout with Spann will kick off the preliminary card of UFC 281 on November 12th, something the former title challenger feels is a bit disrespectful. After the official fight card began circulating on Twitter, Reyes weighed in on the situation, revealing his true feelings toward the bout order in a tweet that has since been deleted where he proclaimed WTF. After a fan encouraged him to look past the placement of the bout, Reyes explained that he felt disrespected by the low placement on the card. Of course, with a spectacular win, Reyes could very quickly find himself back in the spotlight. However, in the midst of a 3-fight skid, things aren't looking great for the 2-time title challenger. When he steps into the octagon against Ryan Spann at UFC 281, do you think the former 2-time title challenger gets the job done? Give us your predictions for the bout in the comments section below. Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the MMA Zone to stay up to date on all of the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.